This is about a perceived loss of control. So I had control over what I was doing before, and you've changed it. Then agency and control is really important for us. We tend to feel more resilient. We tend to feel stronger in life when we've got control over our choices and we feel there are choices that we can make. So if we feel like, even though we might not have, but if we feel like we've lost control over making choice about the way we do things, that's not helpful for us.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Graham.
Hi, I'm Rich.
And the question is, how can you build mindsets that embrace new ways of working? Where would you start with this one, Rich?
Well, Graham, I think in a previous podcast that you and Ricky were doing, we had a slightly different question, which was about how do leaders help their teams adopt new ways of working. I think if you've listened to that one, we talked a little bit in there about loss. Whenever change happens, actually enforced change, there's a sense of loss. So if we put that down and say, okay, there's a sense of loss that's going on, I think maybe what we can talk about here to answer this one is some of the practical things we can try and do to help people come to terms with that. And I think certainly with that, I'd say, there are typically a few reasons why we don't adapt easily to enforced new ways of working or change.
Yeah.
So maybe, if we just go through a few of those. So first one, which stems from loss, is about uncertainty. When things change and new ways of working are brought in, that creates uncertainty for people. And we don't always like uncertainty.
Like that, do we?
No.
Don't like change. Don't do it.
Yeah. Don't change. Don't like it. So I think certainly uncertainty is a big thing. I always sort of say, it's a bit like, if you look out the window on a foggy, misty day and you can't see what's out there.
Yeah.
Think about it in those sort of terms. That's essentially the metaphor for it. Someone's looking at this new way of proposed working, but actually they can't really see it and they can't understand what it's going to be like. So that's created uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty. We like certainty. We spend all our time looking for certainty in life. Whether that's put the telly on, you'll see the weather forecast. That's us looking for certainty. Yeah. Or, if you look at rituals that we create in our daily lives, that's us creating certainty around certain things. So when uncertainty exists and when we've created it, of course, what we want to do is to try and demystify that and create a view out the window, a view of the future that we can make sense of.
Yeah, and I guess that's what leaders and managers try to do, isn't it? Where they go, here's what the future will look like, and some do it better than others, some do it with greater clarity than others. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do with that, isn't it? Is to give a sense of this is what it will look like, in the hope. I guess it's always in the hope to start off with, in the hope that people will buy into that and therefore are clear on what the new world will look like.
Yeah, so if you think that we're talking to ourselves all the time, voicing our heads, our inner narrative, inner critic, whatever we want to call it. One of the things it's doing is it's looking ahead and kind of going, and perhaps these are subconscious, messages that seep through to us into the conscious are about, what's going to happen? Will I be okay? How will this work? What will this mean for me? So when leaders are trying, or as leaders, when we're trying to communicate, this is what we think the future will be like. This is what this new way of working will mean. This is how we're going to do it. We're demystifying that uncertainty, which helps with our internal dialogue. It helps us to then change the self-talk from perhaps being either more neutral or unhelpful to being more helpful, because we're saying, okay, I get it. I can see it. What I need to do now is sort of step into it and have a go. That's very different self-talk to, I don't know what's happening, I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I say the mindset piece is really important here, isn't it? It's because, with any change, actually, I've probably got a very helpful mindset about what I'm doing right now. I know how to do it. So I've got a view on how well I can do it. and now you're wanting me to do something different. And the phrase we use a lot is that, and familiarity trumps change, doesn't it? So I like
Yeah.
the way I like it like this. I like doing things the way I'm doing them. You want me to do something different, and you've created a bit of a view of what the future might look like for me. And that might help with some of that uncertainty. But there's still an element of fear for some people, though, isn't there?
Yeah, so that moves us on. So number one, we talked about uncertainty as some of the 4 reasons. Number 2 is about fear of the unknown. Which again, very similar, but this one moves us perhaps into another concept that comes up here, which is about incompetence. So just as you said, I knew what I was doing before, quite liked the way I was doing it before. Ultimately, I felt competent in what I was doing before, the way of working. Now, there's fear of the unknown has perhaps made me feel incompetent. I don't know how to do what we're talking about. So that's challenging for us. All of us, we like to feel competent at what we're doing and know how to do it. If my level of competence, I feel like it's dropped, that can cause me to perhaps go back into my shell. It can cause me to kind of say, well, actually, no, I want to do what I was doing before. So familiarity trumps change. I want to go back to that. But also, it just doesn't feel good, does it? You're trying to do something and you start to question yourself. If I don't know how to do this, then what does that mean? That affects your self-talk again. So it's quite paralyzing, that one, and we can get stuck if we don't get help to help us move through it.
Yeah, I think in some organisations I've worked in and ones we've worked with, you see that particularly with those people who are perceived as some kind of, whether expert's the right word, but they're perceived to be top of the game, and suddenly the game's changed for them.
Yeah, and that's when we also see behaviours and things that link to a sense of denial. I'm going to pretend it's not happening and do it the way I've always been doing it. That essentially is someone saying, well, 1, I don't like it. 2, I feel quite fearful of it. And 3, I'm not going to do it because I feel incompetent there, and that's not pleasant for me. Yeah. So, it might be saying other things as well, but our old habits are much stronger, of course, than any habit we're yet to create. So they're going to pull us back. Yeah. So it's important for us as leaders to talk about some of that fear, to talk about how people feel about it. And if we want people to create new habits, we've got to put structures around them that engage people in doing the new thing and sharing how they feel about the new thing, which allows people to start to build competence.
Yeah, and making it okay for people to not get it right sometimes. Psychological safety is something we talk about a lot, isn't it? And a psychological safe team will go, okay, I'll give it a go, because what's the worst that can happen? And if it goes wrong, I'm going to get help and support, as opposed to, I don't want to try it because if it goes wrong, I'm going to get told off. Yeah,
you're just trying to catch me out here. That kind of thing. So I think that's number 2. There's a fear of the unknown can lead to sense of incompetence. I think another of the 4, the third one, we've mentioned the word already, but a bit bigger this time. So we've talked about loss. This is about a perceived loss of control. So I had control over what I was doing before, and you've changed it. So I've lost a sense of control. Then agency and control is really important for us. We tend to feel more resilient. We tend to feel stronger in life when we've got control over our choices and we feel there are choices that we can make. So if we feel like, even though we might not have, but if we feel like we've lost control over making choice about the way we do things, that's not helpful for us. So again, how can we help? What can we do? Is we can start to look at what choices can we point out are there and help people to make choices about how they want to do, different things, or the new way of working.
Yeah, and I guess all that can lead to this sense of powerlessness. Is that right? Yeah. Is that a word?
Powerlessness. Yeah, I think it is.
If it's not, we've just created a new word.
We should do more of that. It does. It creates a sense of, and that's really discouraging for all of us times in our lives. If you feel you don't have choice and you feel powerless, that can be quite damaging for people.
Yeah, and I guess within an organisation that almost creates this, or in my head creates this sense of being done to, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm just a number, and you don't care for me, and we just get told what to do, that sort of thing. Now, there's always an element in organisations and in teams that you can't choose to do just what you want to do. There might always be frameworks and guidelines and things we've got to operate within, and that's fine. But within those guidelines and frameworks, where can we create choices for people? Because when we make choice, we feel empowered. And we much prefer, as a species, to have those feelings than we do to feel like we're being controlled. And I mean, you can break that out of organizations and look at societies and think about those things as well. Societies generally function better when people feel like there's choice.
Yep. So what's the final one then? So we've got uncertainty, we've got fear of the unknown, we've got that perceived loss of control and powerlessness.
And the fourth one, the fourth sort of barrier to this is about resistance, and that this is where people will actively resist changing. With this, I always think, and again, it's just my opinion, the resistance is generally because there's some unmet needs that exist for this person or these people. And that could fall back into the categories of things we've just talked about. So if we're seeing resistance, the question really for leaders is to say, okay, why is this person, or why are these people bringing this to me as an act of defiance, if you like? What have we not done? What needs have they got that haven't been met? That are causing people to resist in this way. It could be there's some fear of the unknown. It could be that there's a feeling of incompetence. It could be that there's too much uncertainty. It could be that they feel that they've lost something or they're losing something. It could be a number of things that often shows up in resistance from people. So again, I think we go back to, can we provide more information? Can we provide choice? Can we engage people in some way, shape, or form to feel part of what's happening rather than it's happening to them? And as well as that, is it sometimes it is people's go-to response to just be resistant.
Yeah.
Again, that's telling us perhaps not enough information's been given. Perhaps we've not listened. Perhaps we've not helped people see the choices they've got.
Yeah, and if I think about in my kind of throughout my career, there's been times when I've resisted change. I'm sure pretty much everybody has. And if I think about it, it's fundamentally I bought into the organisation I was working for. I bought into the role I was doing, but there was something about the one always stands out for me. The one key change that I know I was resistant, and to the degree I refused to do something until it kind of came to light that actually I'm causing more problems for other people by not doing the thing that I'm resisting.
Well, what's interesting there, Graham, let's throw a fifth one in. So fifth one, which is very difficult to deal with, is unfairness. So if you felt, and I'm not saying you did, I'm guessing, but if you felt in the situation you were just describing a sense of unfairness, something's been changed, that is fundamentally unfair.
Yeah.
And I can't accept that. That can be really quite difficult to deal with. You bought into the company, you bought into the role, something's been changed, it feels unfair. That can then bring about a resistance. And again, think about that in a bigger context. Think about that with kids. If you've got kids or being a kid, if your kids feel that something's unfair, they'll resist, won't they?
Oh yeah.
They'll act out. We do it as adults. You're queuing up for something in the shop. Someone pushes in. That's unfair. We don't like that. We might overtly act out, or we might, more often than not, actually get back in the car and have a really good moan about somebody that did something. But so I think there's in what you described, what I heard there was some stuff about unfairness, which I think is the hardest of all to deal with, because yes, we can give information, yes, we can listen, we can give choices, we can try and engage. But if somebody fundamentally feels that what's happened is unfair, you might want to discuss why it's not and all that kind of stuff. But if they feel that way, that one, perhaps the only way that one can be undone is through time, it's through acceptance and time, and letting someone come to their own conclusions about it, which can mean that they could eventually decide, okay, I'm going to put it to one side and buy in, and I'll engage again. But it could also mean that they choose not to, and that they want to make some other choices, which might be leaving the team or making a change. And really interestingly, I've just been in a meeting where someone was telling me that a member of the team has resigned, and ultimately, when you work through it, it's because what they felt, some of the changes that are being made, they felt they were unfair and felt they couldn't come to terms with them, and they've mulled it over for a while, and they've resigned and decided to move on. Yeah. So that one is a really tricky one to deal with. You can't make someone feel something is fair if they fundamentally don't believe it is. Even if from our perspective, it's say I'm the leader or you're the leader, even if from our side we think it is fair.
Yeah, and I think if I think back to that kind of instance, for me, the thing that I didn't do was I didn't go and talk to someone about it. I just dug my heels in and didn't do something.
Well, that is very typical of you, to be honest.
Thanks. It's one of my strengths. But it was when eventually I bought into it, it was because somebody, a more senior person, had kind of spotted what was going on. And I guess in essence had gone, we need to speak to him about it because we know Graham really well. And if he's digging his heels in, there'll be a reason why, because that's out of character for him. And it made me think when you talked about kind of dealing with it earlier, one of the things we recognise, I think, isn't it, that managers typically, sweeping statement coming up, but managers typically deal with problems by not dealing with problems. So the resistant person, we don't deal with for fear of conflict. It's going to be a difficult conversation, therefore I'll leave it, and Graham will get on board eventually. Which actually means, I mean, for me, it probably took me about 3 months to get on board with it. And there was some stuff within the change itself that fundamentally I believed in and I agreed with. What I perceived as, your point around the unfairness piece, was I perceived as it should never have been coming to my role anyway.
Okay.
And we were the feedback we got was we were the cheapest option. That's why this particular task came to us. But so it's a really interesting one that as the individual involved, I didn't go and seek out help or support, but a more senior person spotted that this was out of character for me, and then came and kind of ultimately got me on board with it.
And which is what we've said, isn't it? If you see resistance, that is often because there's some unmet needs somewhere. And we do, if you're leading a team, you do have a responsibility. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm confusing myself. I'm not confusing myself. I'm going to confuse what I'm saying. We have a responsibility for leading the team to go and find out what's happening.
Yes. Yeah.
The other person also has a responsibility to talk, but we should always try and open that door like this person did for you in that example. And I think, maybe even worse for a team is that somebody doesn't get on board, but they don't leave.
Yes.
And then that person becomes discussed as being, oh, well, so-and-so, Graham, oh, well, he's difficult, Graham, he's the difficult one. And that can go on for years, and actually Graham does become quite grumpy and perhaps does start to, cause a few issues in the team, not because he's difficult, but just because there are some unmet needs there that might go back a long time that have never been discussed. We ignored it because it was easy to ignore it than to go and say, look, what's going on? What's happening? What have we missed here, Graham, that we need to think about? Now, I think the point with that is you don't want someone hanging around that then can become toxic. Yeah. And it doesn't mean by having the conversation that you solve the problem entirely, but at least you're discussing things, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think, obviously the question we're exploring is how can you build mindsets, and you kind of touched on the mindset piece earlier, and I think that's it, isn't it? That, the mindset I was in at that time was not a helpful mindset. There were elements that I could see some sense in terms of what we were looking to do, but fundamentally my self-talk wasn't very helpful. I was refusing to do something. I was digging my heels in, and wasn't prepared to move on it for a while until somebody kind of helped explore that from again, we once talked about kind of a fixed or a growth mindset at the time, because back then probably that terminology wasn't even around.
There. Yeah.
But kind of think about it now, I very much had a fixed mindset about something, and was encouraged to take a more of a open/growth mindset by somebody else. So I think that kind of, if we're thinking about the mindsets, and we're thinking about moving someone from unhelpful to more helpful, from fixed to growth, we've obviously explored a lot. What are 2 or 3 things then you think we can do to help build the mindsets?
I think try and understand where someone's coming from. Again, so if you see resistance, try and understand where that's coming from. Listen, and then discuss or share as much information as you can. So that would be key. Secondly, I would say, as we've already said, try and help that person understand what choices are there for them, so they have a sense of control, and try and engage that person or those people in moving forwards. What can they practically do?
Yeah.
How can they feel that they can get on board? A lot, there's often a phrase said, isn't there, about we must sell this change to that person. I don't like that phrase, because it's kind of saying we've got to keep repeating our message. So I think listening and understanding comes first. Then you can share information. Then you can look at what choices are available, which might engage someone. So I'd say those are the things that can help some of the things that can help mindsets.
Next time on The Question Is.
People then start going, so why aren't they telling? They announce a change, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it might be, and nothing more's been said about it. And I think people then, that uncertainty creeps in, worry creeps in.
And we fill that gap, don't we?
We fill the gap, we fill the gap.
Rumours, conjecture.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.